students. I'm Dr. Smita Patil, faculty with School of Gender and Development Studies, IGNOR. Today I'm going to discuss the topic caste-based violence, which is part of the course BGS 012. Indian society is highly unequal society. Caste is one of the components that fragmented human beings. It determines the social location. Thus, in this lecture, I'll be dealing with the debates on caste and violence against women from the gender perspective. Our effort is to understand the caste hierarchy, that is basis of the Indian society, and examine how it regulates gender relation in Indian society. The ideology of caste also structure forms of violence on women through rape, honor killing, and so on. So that one has to understand through this lecture the analysis of the caste system in India, explore the relationship of caste and gender, intersection of the caste community and violence. So let us try to understand the concept called caste. Let us revisit the debate on the caste first and the community later from the Indian political perspective. Caste system in India structures a power relationship in society. It directly governs the individual and the society to exercise the power. At the conceptual level, the idea of the caste has a multiple shades which also formulates the social institution of the caste. Different scholars interpret caste differently. To strengthen the understanding on it, let us read some of the scholars. Senate argues that caste is an organization which consists of the dominant chief lead and assembly. It is autonomous and old-style in nature. He further states that the celebration of the festival in which the performance of the particular caste, whether it is a demonstrative in nature by collective manner or through occupation, is identical of the caste system. It also involves procedures of the penal system. Nesfield defines caste as and I quote, class of community, unquote. This conference, again I'm quoting from Nesfield's work, which is cited in Ambedkar's work, intermarriage and commensality, unquote. For instance, we observe that within society, people hold common names through families or communities which are in a homogeneous form. According to Kedkar, caste can be postulated in two significant ways. Firstly, confining the membership within community, and secondly, disapproving marriage outside the community. Kedkar's work again is a very important, which is cited in Ambedkar's work. Now, caste for Ambedkar does transform people into fixed and definite categories. It is analyzed that the ways in which caste determines society is artificial as well. Caste thus is a social construction. It impacts the society in a peculiar fashion. It is further argued that endogamy affects the dialogue and social contract between the diverse section of the society. Therefore, exogamy gains salient over the endogamy. It is often observed that the origin of caste is the origin of the mechanism for endogamy. According to Ambedkar, caste function as an enclosed class. Such a perspective shows how caste and class do intersect in Indian society. However, one needs to understand whether institutions like caste do indeed exist in modern India or not. And in fact, I would recommend Surinder Jodhkar's most recent handbook, which got published by Oxford University Press, and recently his very important paper, which got published in one of the academic journal, which is dealing with the future of the caste. And the handbook also is based on the caste, contemporary caste. So you must, if you are interested, you can, sort of log in and see, and which is these things these days are available very easily in the Google and, social media platforms also, through, the groups which are there. So discussion that emerge on the shifts in the ideological as well as tangible dimension had to be discussed in this context. Sociologists such as Amin Srinivas have explored the transformation of the caste in modern India. According to Srinivas, caste became a realm of political functions in independent India. It happened with the shifts in the power that exists earlier with the British rule to that of the Indian during the post-independent phase. It is analyzed that differences on the discussion related to caste had emerged in that phase of the Indian society. Information relation to the caste link meeting started being circulated through postal letters, telegram, low price papers and printing. The introduction of the railways led to the train becoming common mode of the transport for the diverse segment of the society. They use it as a medium of transport to attend the meeting related to the caste. Inexpensive paper was deployed to report conflict that emerged on the basis of social location or caste. Laws codified under the British Raj did not affect the supremacy of the caste panchayat. They heralded different premises of the justice and probed the discrimination of the people based on the caste identities. However, it is discussed that caste-linked ideology and practices attended different nature in that period. For instance, peasants in India were ardent followers of the orthodox caste panchayat. On the contrary, they accepted the British law as well. Socially regulated economy was questioned by the advent of the British. In other words, the economy in India is determined of caste-based stratification. As discussed earlier, caste classifies people according to that ascribed higher and lower level hierarchical level. Caste thus determines the occupation of the diverse castes, and according to Srinivas, the British administration challenged Indian economy based on primordial ascription of the caste. As a result, low caste became socially mobile and it led them to a secure financial stability. Unlike earlier forms of the caste in the pre-independent India that restricted the social mobility of the lower caste, British rulers for Srinivas opened a new avenues for the lower caste. I mean, if you look at this argument, it's a again been very similar like, Eleanor Zillet and Gail Ombet also, if you look at their work. I mean, if you are interested, you should read the scholars who have done large work which is related on caste and gender also, but specifically to caste also. So the caste has been undergoing multiple changes due to the rapid societal transformation. And if you want to really relate this debate on caste, gender and patriarchy, in relation to that, the reflection in that direction is essential to engage with the facet of the Indian society and polity. Now, for instance, if you relate with the caste, gender and patriarchy, this debate, one would see that caste and gender are deeply interlinked with each other. And for instance, Uma Chakravarti draws the major argument from B.R. Ambedkar's work. Chakravarti demonstrated that if one has to understand caste and gender, one must interpret traditional Brahmanical literature which reflects on Varna and Jati system. Varna means color. In Sanskrit, it refers to the four divisions within Hindu social order. Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, the fifth Varna, come into existence as an outcast in the Hindu society and the untouchables were the part of it. However, Jati refers to the endogamous unit which ensures that members marry within the community. They are traditionally engaged with a certain occupation. So, members of the Jati belong to the members of the decent groups. Thus, every Jati has a different culture, custom, dress code, food habits, rituals and so on. The caste system also divides upper and lower caste, and Chakravarti discusses how Brahmanical patriarchy operates through the system of kinship, marriage, endogamy, and shows that patriarchy has a direct linkages with the caste, class, and gender. Now, the concept patriarchy is a very important in relation to the gender. For instance, if we look at the debate on the patriarchy, Gardner Lerner's work is a very important, the pioneering work, The Creation of the Patriarchy, which got published in 1987, argues that male and females in the routine lives of the significantly shaped patriarchy, and it took almost 2,500 years to its accomplishment. It is argued that, and I'm quoting from the Lerner's work, that the basic unit of its organization was a patriarchal family which both expenses and constantly generates its rule and values, unquote. The laws, tradition, gender laws, performance of the sexes in the society determines their social roles. As the agriculture process that begins with the Neolithic period up stretches the intertribal exchange of the woman, it led to the reinforcing of the more marriages, more reproduction of the children as a surplus labor for the hunting and gathering society. It multiplied production and surplus accumulation through the means of having more women and children. Men had group rights over women, but women never had any sort of right over men. For instance, women itself become a resource like the land assimilated by men. It can be analyzed through the marriage and the family relationship in a vivid manner. In the marriage system, women are exchanged within families, which also leads to the sexual slavery, labor in the everyday basis. Eventually, the historical evidences of the patriarchy, which are described by learners, shows us how the master and slave relation developed in the early tribal society. In fact, if relate this model further towards the African Americans, general black feminists in particular, the arguments stated by the black feminists such as Bell Hooks, Patricia Hill Collins, and the other scholars consider that sexism and racism are initiated, and they argued, and I'm quoting, enslavement, unquote, of the woman in turn. It regulated formation of the classes and subjugation within economy. The relationship of the class and patriarchy is deeply rooted in society. So, in order to maintain the economic interest of the family in the Mesopotamian society during the second millennium BC, poor families used to sell their daughters in marriages or as part of the prostitution. However, this kind of transaction can be observed even today in the various countries of the world. And I must tell you that during the pandemic, post-pandemic, this phenomena across the world was happening, right? Now, what is the intersection of the caste and violence? How patriarchy operates to regulate gender in all class and caste. Hence, regulation of the woman's sexuality and bodies resulted in a violence. For instance, marriage by choice is being challenged by the violence based on the dictates of the patriarchal community. Contemporary India is caught in a paradoxical marriage of a new liberal capitalist values and orthodox patriarchal caste-linked psyche. In other words, pre-modern barbaric hierarchy exists within the logic of new market forces, tradition, and so-called modern values practices coexist in India. Existence of the honor killing symbolizes the existence of the barbaric practices in our nature. Honor killings are being carried out through the Khap Panchayats, which control people through social boycotts and imposition of the fines. Those who violate dictates of the Khaps are forced to commit suicide. I mean, you would see that there are a number of examples when we read newspaper, watch social media, or even, to open up TV or any kind of, news channel. This is a routine matter in India, the Khap Panchayats and the ways in which the patriarchal Khap Panchayat operates. So, if you look at, there are a number of case studies which one can, sort of engage with it. So, according to local Khap Panchayat, and I would recommend, in fact, Prem Chaudhary's work to read and reflect upon to the students. So, according to the local Khap Panchayat, those who marry within the same Godran, within the same village, are regarded as committing incest, and subsequently such union is branded as unacceptable and invalid. Marriage between the diverse Gotra people that belong to the same village is also not acceptable to the Khap Panchayat. So, sometime in case of some Gotras, the bride from the village is compelled to move to another village to join her husband. However, there should not be any kind of prior ties of the kinship or either their mother-in-laws or their sister-in-laws, and therefore all women and the men of the similar plane and the same village are restrained by the morality of the brother-sister relationship. Certain norms and values codified by the Khap Panchayat are patriarchal in nature, and therefore that one has to look at the various case studies which are existing in the contemporary India. Now, if you look at the debate between conceptualizing the caste, you would see the relationship, the endogamy and caste, which is explained and often one would see that even today, these debates and the category of caste is becoming a very stagnant, rigid category, and um, taking a very barbaric shape. Despite being, instead of having legal intervention through the constitutions, like for instance, we do have the scheduled caste scheduled tribe prevention of the atrocity act of 1989. Again, there were changes done, but um, you would still see that caste operates in rural and urban India in a systematic methods and the forms. The everyday politics in the village is majorly based on the caste, and its impact the community, family, individual in a tangible and intangible manner. And if you really want to go and read, some of the very path-breaking work, like for instance, look at the incidences, the Kalanji incident which had happened in Maharashtra, then also the Hathras issue which had happened in India. So there are a number. So you need to also understand the structural and the systemic violence. You know how patriarchy does this too, because um, you have to understand that in the context of caste, that how the caste violence are happening and why there is a difference between that. And there is of course many linkages to the patriarchy, but then it's predominantly that the mindset which is operating in India. So dominant caste keep the surveillance on the low caste, and often one would see that there are different kinds of violences and atrocities happening on the low caste. Or you would see that the best example is the Dalit woman in India. How do they face the problems? So the social, political, economic domains are regulated by the upper caste people, and therefore the upward mobility of the low caste is not tolerated by the upper caste people. And you would see that most of the time, the interstate machineries is actually in the top down. If you see at the top level, that these machineries are operating from those particular communities, whether it's a police, politician, or any other institution, and how then it is manipulated. So one has to also understand this debate in order to understand, the relationship of the class, caste, and gender, and the violence against women from the gender perspective. So it has discussed in many ways that how caste hierarchy regulates the gender relation and its relation further with the communities in India. Um, One of the prime issue again, which is related with this, is that how the sexuality in the bodies of women from the various castes have been subjugated to the violence. As a result, ideology of the caste structure, the forms of the violence on women through rape, honor killing, and so on and so forth, is operating in India, and you will see that uh, even having laws that uh, we are not still very successful dealing with these issues. So one has to understand the relationship of the caste, gender, and in relation to the violence, that how one should engage from the gender perspective. As you know that in this lecture, I put an effort to discuss what are the ways in which that the caste hierarchy regulates, uh, and what are the gender relation in terms of the communities in India. Specifically, if we in fact sort of relate this debate of caste and gender, one would see that it has a specific relationship with the sexuality and bodies of the woman from the various castes which have been subjugated to the surveillance. For instance, that again I would mention that there are a number of the cases which are occurring and earlier also happened. You can also see the Chandaru massacres, you can also see the Khalanji, you can also see the Hathras issue. I mean, there are endless number of the cases which are still occurring in the everyday life in relation with the caste, gender, particularly. Um, as a result, one would see the ideology of the caste structure, how it forms the violence on women, and also the low caste, in genders also, which includes that, if somebody is from lower caste community, for instance, the Dalit community, it may be, I mean, it's the Dalit women who have been constantly targeted with the rape, honor killing, and so on and so forth. At the same time, you will also see that anybody who is Dalit male also have been targeted. When we talk about the caste and gender relationship, of course there is a difference, but one has to also see when one is relating with the violence in order to understand this debate on caste and gender. So thank you.